Welcome to tonight's episode of the most objective show on television, The People's Voice, a platform created for ordinary citizens like you and I to be heard. Tonight, we're shining the spotlight on a very important aspect of our democracy, which is human rights and justice. I am at Defunke Jaisimi, and because you drive our conversations, do well to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Voice of the People TV. Follow us across all social media platforms at VOP Live, and you can also text or call on 090 447 2605. Let's make our voices heard. The number to call again is 090 447 We'd like to hear from you. So let's get the conversation started. Tonight promises to be a very, very interesting, engaging, informative show, I promise. But let's go on a quick break. We'll return shortly with more details. Please stay with us. For decades, Nigerians have faced numerous challenges in accessing justice and having their human rights respected, from police brutality and extortion to arbitrary arrest and detention. Many Nigerian citizens have been left feeling vulnerable and powerless. It's worse for many when Nigerian citizens, get bullied by their fellow citizens, making them see themselves as less of a Nigerian. It's more like you need to know someone in high places to survive in what many people term jungle conditions. Unfortunately, that's what a lot of people see their own country as. But what are human rights? And how are they protected in Nigeria? What mechanisms are in place to ensure that citizens' rights are respected and that justice is served? Tonight on People's Voice, we are joined by Muhammad Adam. He is the principal and founder of Muhammad Adam and Associates, a renowned lawyer and human rights advocate who will help us navigate the complex landscape of human rights and justice in Nigeria. We'll explore the key human rights issues facing Nigerians, the role of institutions like the police and the judiciary, and of course, what citizens can do to assert their rights and demand justice. So let's get started on this very important conversation. The voices of Nigerians matter, and it's time we amplify them. Good evening, Mohammed.
Good evening.
Glad to have you on the show tonight. I'm tempted to call you again.
The pleasure is mine. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for doing this with us. It's the people's voice, and our conversations here are driven by the people, and all of the analysis we have here are supposed to be from the angle of the Nigerian people. I mean, the everyday Nigerian people, not those that have some sort of, you know what I'm saying, connections that can help them judge some of the things that people currently face. But from a solicitor's perspective, tell us the current state of human rights in Nigeria and what are the biggest challenges facing our citizens. Are there any international human rights instruments Nigeria ratify at the moment, and how are they implemented domestically? But let's start from the state of our human rights in Nigeria.
Thank you very much once again. It's my pleasure to be here. The state of our human rights in Nigeria today, it's unfortunately, I have to admit, not very impressive. First of all, what are human rights? Human rights are essentially rights that are given by our Creator, that are God-given rights. But to narrow it down to the legal concepts, we call them fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are rights that are guaranteed by the Constitution of the country. And of course, the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, as amended, has a provision for fundamental rights, and they are contained in chapter 4 of the Constitution from section 33 to section 44 of the Constitution. And these rights are right to life, right to personal liberty, right to freedom of movement, freedom of thought, freedom of press, freedom from discrimination, freedom to acquire both movable and immovable property anywhere in the world, in Nigeria, and of course, right to dignity of human person and right to fair hearing. So as beautiful as these fundamental rights are, unfortunately, I can't say categorically that there are rights that have been completely respected by Nigerians and, of course, even by people in authority. I mean, as you have rightly mentioned, we have cases of police brutality, unlawful arrest, EFCC invading people's premises outside the bounds of the law. And, it's been very unfortunate that that is the state of human rights in Nigeria. And even when we go to court to enforce people's rights and courts give decision, it becomes very difficult, to enforce decisions of the court, especially when it is against an agency of the government. But of course, Nigeria has human rights instruments that we have ratified. For instance, at the regional level, we have the African Charter of Human and People's Rights that has been domesticated in Nigeria by virtue of Section 12 of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And equally, we have other international human rights instruments that Nigeria is a signatory to. And when you look at the aggregation of these instruments, both at the regional level, at the international level, and at the local level as well, I would say human rights has been something, even though our laws recognize it, our constitution recognizes these rights, in the practical sense of it, there have been challenges here and there. I don't know if I have done justice to your first question, but yes.
Yes, you've done so well with that question, telling us about what the process is like. But if this is coming from you, a solicitor, talking about even if you go to court to help people fight for their rights, implementation is a major problem. Who then are we to blame for this?
Okay, first of all, I always tell people that to have a working Nigeria, it's a collective responsibility. Collective responsibility in the sense that the contract between the people and the government is a contract that has both corresponding obligations and duties. So in order to say who do we blame for this, first of all, I would say our agencies of the government, for instance, the Nigerian Police Force, as much as the Inspector General of Police, right from the past till now, have given all sorts of directives to our police officers. You still see some of these people extorting Nigerians. You see some of these their officers, arresting people unlawfully, detaining people for periods that are longer than the period required or constitutionally allowed. So it's an institutional problem, a serious institutional problem, in the sense that when you look at how policemen who are found, wanting or violating human rights are disciplined, Nigerians are not exactly motivated about, effective implementation of human rights. Because when these people are, for instance, relieved of their work, the question is what happens to them subsequently. Are they charged to court? For instance, for those that killed people unlawfully, are they charged to court? What is the progress report on some of these things? So when people get to know the progress report on these erring police officers or even military personnel, and Nigerians are constantly informed about it, then people will know that actually fundamental rights it's making progress. Effective implementation of fundamental rights or enforcement of fundamental rights is making progress. So that is that on the part of the government. So there is a need for the government to wake up to its responsibility, especially our uniformed men, enlighten them and see how they can begin to see the need to respect fundamental rights. The second part of it is the people. Nigerians are probably one of the most lawless people I've come across. People know that, and I'll give you an example.
Yeah, we want to hear that.
Yeah, a case of loan. For instance, someone gave a loan of 5 million naira to another person, and he feels that, oh, this person is not paying my money, then I will use police to arrest the person and just come up with a fictitious petition. As a matter of law, a case of debt recovery is not a criminal matter.
Really?
And it is not a case of debt. If someone is owing you money, the Supreme Court has said it in several cases. In fact, I'm coming to that. When a matter is reported to the police and it's supposed to be a civil matter, it is the responsibility of the police to refer those people back to court and say, no, this is a civil matter, go to court. But you see that people report cases of debts to the police, cases of breaches of contract to the EFCC, and to what end? So that EFCC or the police can arrest these people and force them or make them to now start making a commitment to pay. But as a matter of law, it is a breach of their fundamental rights. And there are cases on this point where the courts have said that cases of breach of contracts are civil matters, cases of debt recovery are civil matters, and nobody should report such cases to the police or to law enforcement agencies.
But in a case where the person owing that money is trying to play pranks, or maybe because they have a knowledge of the law and they decide not to make payments for whatever loan they've taken, what can the people do?
Yes, the people can simply engage lawyers to file a fundamental right action. To file a civil action in court. Because like I said, a case of debt recovery or breach of contract is a civil matter, and you go to civil court for it, not a criminal matter.
Okay.
Yes. So, and in fact, what our courts have now done is to award damages against the person that reported a civil matter to the police and against the police, so that you can learn that a civil matter or a case of debt recovery should not be reported to the authority. In fact, the court said the police and EFCC, they are not debt recovery agencies. They are not debt recovery agents. Therefore, they have zero business with debt recovery. So, essentially, what I'm saying is that it is not just the government that is responsible for violating people's fundamental rights. Individuals as well have a role to play in this unfortunate situation we find ourselves. Because, I mean, if an individual has not reported a civil matter to the police, there's no way the police will be involved in the first place.
Okay.
So that's the point.
Thank you for the clarity on that issue. But you've mentioned the parts where the government need to take actions. You've talked about citizens now. We've seen institutions failing people, infringing on human rights, various sectors, even government parastatals. We've seen people have complaints which would say that it's not the best way to go. But in all of this, as a legal practitioner, what do you think are the biggest challenges facing Nigerian citizens when it comes to justice and their human rights?
Thank you. The first one is lack of proper awareness on the existence of fundamental rights and their limitations. That's the most important point that I will mention, or the biggest challenge. Okay. The second one is corruption. Corruption, of course, is an unfortunate situation that happens in every part of this country. Because someone knows that there are no consequences for my action, they go the illegal way to do things and end up violating people's fundamental rights. So corruption is another thing. Abuse of power is another thing. An average Nigerian believes that if I am in position of power, then I can do and undo. It's a serious challenge to fundamental rights. And that is why you see that an employer can report an employee to the police so that the employee can be detained by the police over an employment issue. That is an abuse of power. Abuse of power by the employer and abuse of power by the police. So this is also a serious challenge facing fundamental rights enforcement in Nigeria. Another challenge that I believe is facing enforcement of fundamental rights in Nigeria is lack of effective implementation or enforcement of decision of the court. Disobedience to court. If a court gives an order, it is not the responsibility of the judge to go to the town and enforce compliance with these laws or with the orders of the court. But what we have seen in practical sense is when court gives an order, an authority or an agency of the government decide to disregard the courts. So it's a very serious challenge. And of course, it shows that our judicial system is sort of weak when it comes to implementing or enforcing court orders. And unfortunately, there's nothing we can do about it because it's not the court's duty to go to the town again to enforce its orders.
Okay, so after passing judgment, there's little that can be done by the judge. But still speaking about these challenges, let's talk about ignorance. We've seen cases, as a matter of fact, it's about the biggest when talents, especially when they are new in the industry, are so desperate to come to limelight. And oftentimes, I'm trying to refer this to employer-employee that you spoke about. Most times, a lot of management tend to take advantage of the innocence or the vulnerability or naivety of these talents and make them sign some contracts that they don't have details of. And in most cases, these talents don't even have lawyers at the beginning. So they get to commit themselves into things that they have no knowledge of. Then when they start seeing what it feels like in the industry, there's a need to challenge their employer, as you may want to call it. Then the books are open to say, you signed this, you signed that. This happens both for the regular conventional artists, the unconventional artists. Even for the gospel artists, we had one that is currently trending. Is there justification for ignorance? Is there a point you get to that you say, okay, I might not know that this happened, but I'm tired?
That's a wonderful question. The starting point to that question is there's a maxim of law that says ignorance of law is not an excuse.
Okay.
But ignorance of facts is an excuse. So if someone claims to be ignorant, yes, ignorance is a serious issue in Nigeria of so many laws that we have in this country. But of course, that is not excusable. The second point is that if someone is advised to get a lawyer when there are no troubles, all they will tell you is, oh, I don't want trouble, I don't make trouble, so I don't need a lawyer. But what people forget or what people don't realize is that point that you are saying you do not need a lawyer, that is actually the point that you need a lawyer.
Right.
So that a lawyer can easily guide you in your contracts, in your relationship with people, as an artist, as a talent, or whatever it is you are. You need a lawyer at every point in your life. You may not be able to afford the services of lawyers from the get-go, but as you go on, always make provisions for that. So that a lawyer who is learned in some of these areas can properly guide you. Now, if you have been forced to make a commitment or to sign something that you now need to resile from, the law allows you, if you can show with evidence that you were actually forced to sign this, or you were under an undue influence, or you were under duress to make this commitment.
This might be difficult to get. I mean, how do you prove something as... Because in most cases, the joy when you get that platform sort of covers every other thing. So
yes. So, but another thing is desperation.
Right.
A lot of these young talents are desperate to make it. They are desperate to be
Everybody
popular.
wants money. Everybody wants to be big.
But the truth of the matter is that, okay, one thing I tell people is that he who fails to learn from the mistakes of others will learn the hard way. And that's why, as a talent, if you are a young talent in Nigeria, you need to be aware of some of these things. So that when you learn from people's mistakes, you don't make those mistakes. I'll give you examples. We have Ari's song and 5 Star Record some times ago that they had their problems. We have G Worldwide and
He's
Kiss
Daniel.
Daniel.
Right.
We have this guy that left this Mehdi and P Square.
P Square, right?
Too many examples to
Mohbad
start.
and Naira Marley.
Mohbad and Naira Marley
Mercy Chinwo and a manager.
Mercy Chinwo and the manager. So the reason some of these problems are happening is that a lot of people at the point of contracting, they do not contact lawyers. I mean, I've read some contracts that I ask myself, who drafted this? But of course, there are different principles that can be explored in challenging some of those contracts. But as a matter of necessity or as a matter of facts, when people do not see the need for lawyers, they tend to learn the hard way. And this is a wake-up call to everybody out there that please, it is very, very important to have a lawyer beside you so that your human rights, when you sense that your human rights are being violated, a lawyer can swing into action immediately. When you sense that, I mean, it's very difficult to have access to justice without engaging a lawyer.
Okay.
It's very difficult.
All right, thank you very much. Because of time, I want to take something in your response to whether there are any international human rights instrument Nigeria ratified. You confirmed that there were some. Can you tell us how are they implemented domestically?
That makes provision for some of these rights that we're talking about. And the first step towards implementing them is to make them part and parcel of our laws in Nigeria. And for the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, the National Assembly has actually done that by domesticating it. And on implementation, I mean, we've had cases like Gani Fawehinmi and Federal Republic of Nigeria, Gani Fawehinmi and Abacha, and a host of other cases where people have taken advantage of this international instrument to enforce their rights. I recall one time Olisa Agbakoba was prevented from traveling. They seized his passport. He went to court and he succeeded. We've also had a number of clients that have enforced their rights under this law, but because some of these things do not really make it to the news, that's why people don't think that they exist. But
is it because some of these things don't make it to the news, or the fact that these people you've mentioned are prominent people? Would you agree that the laws are not same for everybody in Nigeria, or some people are just privileged?
To be honest, I concede to the fact that some of these cases are cases of prominent Nigerians. But for those Nigerians that are not popular, to be honest, our judicial system is actually trying, so that I won't say, oh, everything is completely bad. There are individuals, I mean, on the streets, there are people that we've had to take out from the prison. There are people that we've had to, enforce their fundamental rights against unlawful detention, against the police and all of that, that they've succeeded. But the success rate is very low compared to what it should be. I mean, we have National Human Rights Commission, a commission of the Federal Republic of Nigeria that is also starting with the responsibility of enlightening people on fundamental rights at the local and national level. And so far they've been doing their best as well. Essentially, people just need to be aware of some of these rights, and when they are aware of this right, it makes it easier for them to know when their rights are being violated and when they are not being violated. And of course, there are limitations to this right. I need to mention this very quickly.
Okay.
There are limitations to this right. Section 45 of the Constitution, for instance, makes provisions for limitation to some of these fundamental rights. And one of those limitations is public morality, public health, public rights, and protection of rights of other people. And that is why we have laws of defamation. For instance, defamation is both a civil matter and a criminal matter. So if someone makes a defamatory statement, which is very, very common these days, if someone makes a defamatory statement against another person, a civil action or a criminal action can be filed against that person. And that person cannot claim that his fundamental right to freedom of expression is being breached. You have right to freedom of expression, but there are limitations to it.
Okay,
Which, yeah,
sorry. Let's go straight to justice system. You've mentioned quite a number of things, but let's go to justice system and institutions. Let's start
yes.
with this. What are the major obstacles to accessing justice in Nigeria, and how can they be addressed?
Okay, thank you. The first one is, which I think I've mentioned, is the independence of the judiciary. The judiciary is greatly challenged with its independence, and that is why it becomes very difficult for people to.
When you sorry, when you say challenged with its independence, that sounds like a very diplomatic statement. Can you tell us what that means?
Okay, I'll give you an example. The judiciary has been fighting for judicial autonomy in terms of its finances, and that is why you have judicial staff, going on strike 1 week, 2 weeks, and the court system is shut down. So when the court is shut down, then how do we have access to justice? It's difficult. That's number one. Number two is the fact that the cost of litigation in Nigeria is very expensive. I have to say that. And that is why it takes extra effort to see people who can actually, give you pro bono services. I'll give you an example. Let's say I'm in Lagos. I'm representing an indigent person. He has filed a case in court. The judgment is against him. I go to Court of Appeal. The judgment is against him. I need to go to Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is in Abuja. I am in Lagos. Who sponsors my journey to Abuja to have access to justice?
Your client.
But my client is indigent. So the system is rigged against an indigent citizen who wants to have access to justice. The second thing, and by way of recommendation, which some of us have said, that we have about 16 divisions of Court of Appeal in Nigeria. Why can't we have the same thing about Supreme Court? Or even the six geopolitical zones. The six geopolitical zones, each of them has a Supreme Court sitting in each region, so that it makes it very easy for someone who wants to appeal judgment to the Supreme Court to do that. Then that goes down to the cost of litigation. Another challenge that is facing access to justice is ignorance. Ignorance is a serious issue that a lot of people don't even know when their rights are being violated. They don't even know that, oh, this is the court I need to go to, or this is the agency of the government I need to speak with and have access to justice. So, except all of these things are properly addressed, it may be very difficult for Nigerians to enjoy. And the Constitution is very clear. Section 46, for instance, it says anybody who feels his right is being or likely to be infringed upon can go to court. But in the practical sense, how easy is it
To go
as it
to
is
court.
the Constitution?
You talked about ignorance, and I want us to relate this to the experience of a lot of people. We've talked about talents management. Let's come to marriage. You just talked about people not knowing who to talk to, agencies to go to when they are having issues. Do you think that our society in any way have shaped the people to accept some indecency, some sort of infringe on their human rights, especially when it comes to marriage and how women are treated in the society?
Oh, wow, this is a very sensitive question, so I'll be careful with my response.
But I would like to have it regardless.
First of all, you know, Um, an average Nigerian believes that there is something called signing of divorce paper. First of all, there's nothing like that.
Oh,
And yes,
yeah,
and
I
that's
saw a
7.
post. You wrote something about that, but it wasn't detailed. So what do you
Yes,
mean? Because many Nigerians actually think that you just get to sign a divorce paper and that's it.
no, there's nothing like that under our legal system.
Okay.
Our legal system, the only legal system that Nigerians think or Nigerians try to understand that concept from is the American legal system. That you just sign divorce paper and go. But here in Nigeria, if you need to dissolve a marriage, for instance, you go to court, file a petition, serve the other party responds, you go to court, testify, and the court now decides whether indeed this marriage has broken down irretrievably. And that is when the court would, dissolve the marriage. But the government has also tried, for instance, Lagos State has an institution that attends to domestic violence cases. And there's a domestic violence agency that has recorded tremendous successes about how women are treated in marriages. But the question is, how many people are aware? How many people know that this thing actually exists without having to go to court? And that is where education and enlightenment coming. Very, very important.
Okay.
People need to know that yes, these agencies exist aside going to court. And of course, because we have a system in Nigeria where families always have a way of settling disputes.
Exactly. That's where the society comes in.
That yes, the society has a role to play too. But I always tell people that when it gets to the stage that domestic violence is involved, when it gets to a stage where everybody, your life is now being threatened, why don't you walk away instead of wait? Because if you die today, the members of the family will move on. If you remain in an abusive relationship or an abusive marriage today, because of children, if you have children, will live on. So whether as a man or as a woman, it is just very important for you to prioritize yourself as well and your life beyond the letters of the law. It is just very important because there is little law can do for you when you are no more.
Right.
And of course,
Okay.
we also have some international instruments that have tried to reduce all sort of discriminations against women. There is convention against eradication of all sort of discrimination against women, CEDAW, which Nigeria is also a signatory to, and that convention essentially targets women and girl child education, proprietary rights, because in some communities in Nigeria, a woman cannot inherit, which is a serious case of fundamental rights. I did a matter in Port Harcourt recently where we challenged some members of the family who excluded their elder sister from inheriting or even participating in family meetings because she's a woman. And there are so many cases that have been decided against that, that says that when a matter of custom is concerned, women have equal rights. They have right to inherit property. They have right to be members of the head of the family, among other things. But to what extent are Nigerians also complying with this law? In one of my classes, in jurisprudence classes, my lecturer said, it's one thing for the court to say something. It's another thing for members of the public to follow the court.
Right.
There are cases where the court have said women can do this, women can do this, women can acquire properties, they can be head of the family. But back in the community, they will still tell you, let the court come and change it for us.
Right. We understand that all of these things happen
Yes.
every time. But before we go to police brutality and accountability, we have the National Human Rights Commission, NHRC.
Yes.
We also have the Police Service Commission, PSC. Right? I wanted to confirm this. So for institutions like the National Human Rights Commission and the Police Service Commission. What role do institutions like this play in promoting human rights and, very importantly, accountability?
All right, thank you very much. So I mentioned earlier, National Human Rights Commission is an agency of the federal government that is saddled with the responsibilities of promoting human rights, enlightenment on human rights, and ensuring that the human rights system in Nigeria is very effective. And to this end, I'm aware that the National Human Rights Commission has organized conferences, seminars, and they've engaged members of the public to educate them on human rights issues. And I'm aware also that they have a legal department where they assist indigent citizens, and we even have the Legal Aid Council. The Legal Aid Council is also an agency of the government that renders legal services for members of the public for the enforcement of their fundamental rights, criminal defense, among other things. There's the Police Service Commission, essentially focuses on the police system in the country in terms of appointment, promotion, discipline, and we've had cases where erring members of the Nigerian police force have been suspended, some have been dismissed from service. People and if very few of them are reportedly are standing trials in different courts. Many of them are also in prison as we speak. I mean, police officers that have been found wanting by Police Service Commission, and they were eventually tried in court and found guilty, and some of them are still standing trial. Okay. So I want to believe that these things are happening, but the success rate is not just very, very impressive.
Right.
To give confidence in the people that, oh yes, fundamental rights is a thing in the country, and Nigerians can actually enjoy fundamental rights to the fullest.
Okay, thank you so much for the responses so far. I mean, it's been an eye-opener. Personally, I've learned a lot, and I'm sure that our viewers are learning so much for your insights so far. But we need to go on a break now. Please stay with us. We would be back to talk about police brutality, which is something that everybody wants to hear. Stay with us. Staying with us, and I'm sure that you are enjoying this conversation. Like I always say, this is about the most objective show on television, where we bring conversations driven by the Nigerian citizen. Dilo, are you there?
Good evening.
All right, thank you for staying with us too. Let's talk about police brutality and accountability. Let's take it from this point. What mechanisms are in place to hold police officers accountable for human rights abuses? And are they effective?
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I have a number of friends in the Nigerian police, and I've had conversations with some of them, asking them this question: that there are cases of police brutality in Nigeria, and how do you address this? And the responses have always been, one, there is a toll system where, in Lagos State today, there are phone numbers, and I think that department is managed by the police PRO. There are phone numbers you can easily call to report cases of police brutality and human rights abuses. And I mean, if you are very active on Twitter, for instance, or X, for instance, you see where many people have, tried to reach the Nigerian police PRO through social media as well. Recently, I'm aware that Lagos State, the police PRO in Lagos State, released the phone numbers of DPOs, area commanders in different area commands in Lagos State. And I've also seen in Delta State, for instance, where the Delta State Police Command PRO has constantly engaged people to reporting cases of police brutality and human rights abuses. So these things are there. Social media is a platform where people do that as well, especially for those that are not abusing it, because that's a different conversation entirely.
Entirely.
The extent to which people now use these things is a different thing entirely as well. But the platform is there for people to report police brutality and human rights abuses. I mean, I participated in NSAS protest in 2020, and we saw how that how that ended. Till today we still have reports of police brutality everywhere. And beyond what the government is, I always tell people that those of you that have uncles, brothers, parents in the Nigerian police, what do you tell them? I mean,
Interesting question.
It's terrible that I would have someone working in the system and I ask them, what role are you playing as an insider?
Do you think people can get the right answers asking this question?
So it makes it difficult. If you are asking the leaders the question, and the leaders that are far away from you, but you cannot ask your uncle, you cannot ask your brother, you cannot ask your
boyfriend, your daddy.
Yes, I was talking to someone recently, and the person said that before you can get into the Nigerian police, you need strong connection. And I'm like, the same police that everybody is cursing, the same police that everybody is, saying, God forbid, God forbid. So it is that bad. And I tell people that, see, Nigeria cannot be good without a change of mindset. Our leaders are not imported from anywhere. Members of the Nigerian police force that are brutalizing people, that are extorting money from people, they don't come from anywhere. They are Nigerians like us. So Nigerians, we are the problems. And if we are going to solve the problem, see, the government cannot solve every problem. That's the truth. The government cannot. What we are currently doing is a problem-solving situation. We are enlightening the people. We are telling people how things are done. I'm not sure any government has engaged you to do this. No government has also engaged me to do this. But we are enlightening the public, telling them the problems and the solutions.
Yeah,
so
because that's because we genuinely care about the people here.
Exactly. So, are we not Nigerians?
So that takes me to the conversation around citizen engagement and advocacy.
Yes.
What can ordinary citizens do to promote human rights and demand justice in Nigeria? You've talked about the fact that there are mechanisms, there are platforms that have been created, but we don't know how much results have been achieved using these platforms. But what can we do as ordinary citizens? What can we do to promote human rights and demand justice? What role can civil society organizations and community groups play in promoting human rights and justice? Let's answer that.
Yes, thank you. One of the things we can do is this engagement that we're having at the moment. Because you can't promote something that you are ignorant about. You can't demand for something that you don't know how it works. So enlightenment is the most important role that we need to focus on, or the most important thing that we need to focus on, so that when everybody knows how human rights are enforced, how they operate, it takes, why do we see a young person, and I'll give you an example. We are passing on the street, you see an elderly person just beating a younger person, and you stop that person. you have put a stop to human rights abuse. So as an individual, as a citizen, we just need to be constantly aware of the happenings in our society and find a way to play our own role. The second thing is, you talked about civil societies.
Right.
To be honest, most of these NGOs are just after what they want to collect as donations from international organizations. Some of them are not just doing anything. When some of these NGOs go into meetings with government agencies, say the Nigerian police, the Nigerian army, or government officials, you see them, not really discussing the issues. Or once they attend the meetings, they snap pictures, that's the end. They don't really demand for accountability. For people that demand for accountability, we see how some of them are treated. So it boils down to, the intention behind human rights advocacy in Nigeria.
Okay, the final part tonight, because we need to do more of this. I'm sure that a lot of people watching right now don't even have an idea about some of the things, some of the revelations that you've made. Before we go to reforms and recommendations, still talking about human rights, in a few seconds, do you think that parents violate the rights of their children by the way the culture has designed parenting in Nigeria?
I want to first, one of the instances is the female genital mutilation.
Okay.
It's a serious human rights issue.
Very big one.
But many children have to face, human rights abuses in that regard. And like you said, the way parenting is designed, culturally, religiously, people's rights are violated. Another instance is when it comes to marriage. Some parents would say you cannot marry this person because of this religion, because of this tribe, because of this. It's a serious human rights abuse. It's a matter of discrimination, Section 42 of the Constitution. Another instance where I think parents abuse human rights in Nigeria is when it comes to career decisions. Freedom of thought, and every adult should be able to take decisions and all of that. I agree that for children, they may not be able to take certain decisions themselves, but parents are to guide them. But you see parents taking decisions for adults because, yes, we are your parents and we know what is best for you.
Okay.
So, yes, I think those are a few instances I can.
Yeah, I'm sure that we would have these conversations over and over again, and there will be so much more to talk about, yes, because we really need to also talk about workplace, human rights in workplaces. The labor laws are looks like it's made for
and all of that.
Right, but because of time, let's quickly wrap up on this. We hope that you will be here to attend to some of our questions whenever we call you. Let's talk about reforms and recommendations quickly. What reforms are needed to strengthen Nigeria's human rights framework, in your opinion? And secondly, what recommendations do you have for citizens, civil society, and policymakers, people in the corridors of power, to promote human rights and justice in Nigeria?
Thank you very much. So by way of reforms, to be honest, I think we just need to strengthen our law that focus on human rights. And how do we strengthen our law? By giving the courts the independence that it deserves, and access to justice. I mentioned it earlier. We need to bring the justice system closer to the people. The people should not feel that the justice system is far away from them. So there's a need to bring the justice system closer to people, so that it's like the justice is having access to the people, not that the people are having access to justice when it's far away from them. And another thing is, some of these government agencies need to wake up to their responsibility. National Orientation Agency is an agency of federal government that is lagging behind seriously when it comes to enlightenment, because essentially this agency was created to enlighten the people on government policies, human rights issues, among other things. But how effective are they?
These are failures
Not
from institutions.
Yes, so institutional, reforms very very important. Let people that know the job be in the office, not man no man type of employment into the public service.
Okay.
And for for civil rights organizations, government NGOs, human rights activists, the intention behind human rights advocacy should not be for the cameras, should not be for pictures, should be for the genuine purpose of fighting human rights and ensuring that we use our platforms to encouraging people about human rights. Social media influencers should see the need to
All
discuss
right.
human rights issues on their platforms. And before you know it, many Nigerians that don't know about some of these rights will come to terms with them. And I mean, today I was talking about landlord and tenants. There are human rights
Yeah,
issues,
that's going to
and
be a conversation on its own. I saw that too, and I know
yes,
that
and
there's no
a
way we are
lot
going
of
to
it.
have that in this conversation because it's a very, very broad
Yeah,
conversation.
it is. It is. It
All
is.
right.
Thank you very much.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you very much for doing this with us
My
on
pleasure.
the Voice of the
Thank you
People
very much.
television.
Thank
It's
you.
people's
Thank
voice,
you.
and that's how we wrap up the show tonight. Do well to join us same time tomorrow for more people-driven conversations. I am Adefunke Jaisimi, and I strongly believe in the Project Nigeria. Nigeria will be great again. Good evening.